That you're learning from nature, you're hearing, listening to nature?
Yeah. You're hearing about nature, and you're also listening to nature. Okay. When Immanuel Kant is describing physics in the modern sense, he has interesting proportion, and he says that in physics, in experimental physical sciences there, we learn from nature not in the way that a student learns from his teacher, but in the way that the judge learns from the witness. There's some truth to that, right? Because as a good scientist to tell you, we never perform all the experiments that we could perform, and we just choose to perform this experiment because we have this thing we want to test. And so we hear only what nature says in response to our question. We don't sit down and just listen to nature, whatever she has to say. So the witness doesn't get on the stand and just say what he wants to say. Keeps his mouth shut until we ask him a definite question. But in this book here, we're listening to nature like a student listens to his what? Teacher. The student listens to all his teacher has to say. Okay? You see the difference there? Interesting proportion there. I don't think Kant realizes that we should listen to nature first as a student listens to his what? Teacher, right? Later on, we have to listen to nature in the way that the judge or the lawyer listens to the witness. Okay? Kant wants to listen to nature only in that second way. But I say we ought to listen to it first as a student listens to his teacher. Because hearing is the what? The ear is the sense of instruction from another. And we have a fragment of Heraclitus, one of the greatest thinkers, the central thinker in human thought. He says, wisdom is to speak the truth and to act according to nature, giving ear thereto. That's what Aristotle's doing here, right? He's giving ear thereto. So he's listening to nature in what nature has to say about nature. Okay? At the same time, you'll see that this is fairly close to what we actually understand. We'll see that when we get further into the book. So in a way, we listen to nature on the basis of what we naturally understand. So there's a lot of reasons why this book could well be called the Book of Natural Hearing. And there are actually 8 books, and we're going to be reading just certain parts of these. Okay. Now the division to reading, this is the one you find with Thomas, into lectios. And lectio could be translated lecture or reading, by like the word reading. So if you ever look at Thomas's commentary, this would correspond to the first lectio in Thomas's commentary. Okay. Now, I think we've spoken before, haven't we, about the difference between the logical division of a work and the editorial division of the work? Didn't we speak about that when we talked about the Bible, for example? Yeah. I mean, take the Gospel of St. Matthew, right? The editorial division of the book is into 28 chapters, and the chapters is down to verses. And so you can refer to any chapter or verse that you want to, right? But now, when Thomas divides the work as a whole, does he divide it into 28 parts? No. He says the Gospel of St. Matthew is emphasizing the humanity of Christ, right? As man, he came into the world, he proceeded through the world, and he left the world. The Gospel of St. Matthew is divided into 3 parts. Okay? Correspond to those 3. So the logical division, the division that helps you to understand the book, right, is much different than the editorial division. Editorial division is just a convenience for referring to any chapter or any particular passage. Now, just about every book of Aristotle's is divided into two parts at first. And the two parts are proportional to the way we divide Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Now, how would you divide Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet?
Preface or that?
Yeah, the prologue and the play, right? Okay. Now, not every work of Shakespeare's has a prologue, right? There's a prologue at the end of the age, but in Romeo and Juliet, you have a prologue and a play, right? And the prologue is very small compared to the play. But it prepares the way for the play, right? So the prologue to Romeo and Juliet is written in the form of a Shakespearean sonnet. Two households both alike in dignity. In fair Verona, where they are seen, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. That first quatrain sets the stage, in the city of Verona, right? Two powerful families are in conflict to the point of shedding blood, right? Then the second quatrain, from forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventure pitches over those, to with their death bury their parent strife. So introduced now today is going to be a tragedy, right? Something, he mentions pity there, right? Whose misadventure pitches over those. And then the third quatrain mentions the other emotion that tragedy arouses fear. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which not but their children's in, now that draws traffic of our stage. And then there's a little couplet, to which if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toils shall strive to mend. Okay? So the prologue in a way is preparing you for the kind of play it is. It's even more clear in Henry VIII there when he says, I come no more to make you laugh, he says. You gotta use something very tragic and serious, and okay. So Romeo and Juliet then is divided into the prologue, which kind of prepares one for the kind of play it's going to be, and then the play itself, which is a major part, obviously, right? Okay. Well, almost every work of Aristotle is divided into what they call the proemium, and sometimes they call the other part the tractatus. Okay. But the main body of the work. Now, proemium is a Greek word which could be perhaps translated by the phrase paving the way. Okay. And the proemium, of course, is very short. You occupy usually the beginning of the first book, but not even the whole of the first book. So it's much smaller in comparison to the whole, right? But in some way it prepares the way or paves the way. Okay. We look at the proemium, remember, to wisdom, beginning of metaphysics. Okay. And the most essential thing of proemium is what is called the scopus, the aim, what you intend in the book, right? But then sometimes you go on and say something about why it's desirable and how we're going to proceed and so on, right? Okay? But it prepares the way. Tractatus, you have in the Latin, they'll use that for the main body, but it means what? Drawn out. So the proemium tells you what it's all about in a very precise way, but in a way that prepares you for the work. And the tractatus is drawn out, right? Okay. If you look at De Verbum, the Constitution and Divine Revelation, in the Second Vatican Council, if you get the official text, the Latin text, right? Is at the very beginning of proemium. It's identified as a proemium. And it's really a masterful proemium, if you study that. Magnificent, But in the English translation I have, they call it introduction. Introduction is a what? Two, right? See? That's already going into the matter. That's it. So it should not be called introduction in the translation, but the translator doesn't know what a premium is and how premium differs from a what? From a introduction, right? Okay. If I can give a whole course, let's say, an assumption that might be called introduction to something, right? Okay, very common college introduction to this or that science, right? But you actually go into the ways, right? Premium just is saying very short at the beginning, huh? What you're aiming at and maybe something about how you're going to proceed, huh? Okay. So this first reading is Aristotle's premium to natural philosophy. Okay. Now Plato had already spoken a bit about this. If you go to the Timaeus, which is not so much a dialogue, but Timaeus speaking about the origin of the universe and so on, and the cosmos, right? But he has the premium first. Which is magnificent premium. And Socrates, of course, just sits and listens. Okay? And when he finishes the premium, Socrates applauds, magnificent premium he's had, right? And if you look at the Greek of that premium and Aristotle's premium to Nicomachean Ethics, they're very, even the words seem very similar, right? Okay? So Plato saw that need in a treatise to have a premium, right? Okay? It's analogous to the overture in a
Symphony.
In an opera, that's right. Which would be different, right? The overture to Don Giovanni would be different than the overture to Così fan tutte, right? And kind of set the mood. But it's most likely a prologue in a play, right? Okay? Now, what is Aristotle going to do in this premium? He's going to do two things, just two things. One is what we're aiming at, right? Okay? What the scopos is, meaning. Okay? And secondly, and this took up most of the thing, he's going to talk about the order in which we should consider these things we're aiming at, right? Okay? So the aim there is in the very first paragraph, and all the rest of it will be about the order there. Okay? So let's look at the first paragraph here. He says, since understanding and knowing why, in all sciences of which there are beginnings or cause elements, come to be from knowing these, for then we, and that's not the editorial we, it means we, the Greek philosophers, right? For then we think we know each thing when we know its first causes and first beginnings, and as far as its elements. It is clear that in the science of nature one should first try to determine about the beginnings. Now, those first words in that paragraph, since understanding and knowing why, Thomas in his commentary takes understanding, which is the Greek word idene there, to refer to knowing what, right? Okay? And knowing what and knowing why are both from knowing what? Causes, Okay? But he uses three words here instead of just the word cause, right? Beginning, causes, elements, Okay? And Thomas points out how Aristotle shows the character of those three words, the meaning of those three words, in the beginning of the fifth book of wisdom. Okay? And then he raises the question of how he's using those three words here, right? Okay. Now, in the fifth book of wisdom, the first three words are beginning, cause, element. And beginning is more general than the word cause. Every cause is in some way a beginning, but not every beginning is a cause. And the stock example is that of, say, a point. A point, for example, is the beginning of a line, the cause of the line, right? The beginning of the day is not the cause of the day, right? So beginning is more general than what? Cause. That's very important in to talk about God the Father and God the Son, right? Because you really should say God the Father is the cause of God the Son, then God the Son would be a creature, right? But you can say that the Son proceeds from the Father, right? And so the Father can be said to be a what? Beginning, right? And sometimes, that's one meaning they give to the words there, John. In the beginning was the Word, huh? The Word was in the Father. Father's in I, and I in the Father. The Father is the beginning. So beginning is more general meaning than what? Cause, right? Although many of the meanings of beginning refer to causes, huh? And all causes can be called beginnings, huh? So Aristotle is speaking very precisely, in the 5th book of Wisdom, when he's really giving his most careful determination of his words, he points out that beginning is what? More general meaning than cause, right? But a lot of times we use beginning and cause almost interchangeably because that's the kind of beginning the philosopher is interested in, because he wonders what and why. And yet he's looking for beginnings in the sense of causes. Okay? Now, element is much more particular than cause. Actually, we'll meet later on in the course that there are 4 kinds of causes. The matter out of which something is made, right? The form it has, shape, ratio, order it has, then the mover or the maker of it, and then end or purpose. Huh? What element is used just for the what?
Matter.
The matter, yeah. Because that's much more particular, right? Okay. Now, in mentioning these 3, there are 3 words that are very common with the Greeks when they talk about causes. So Aristotle may want to simply what? Indicate that there are many kinds of causes by using these 3 words, right? And later on we'll sort out the different kinds of causes. Or Thomas suggests that you can also adapt these different kinds of causes. You can adapt element to matter, and beginning especially to the what? Mover or maker. So when we say God is the beginning and the end of all things, we use the word beginning there to mean the maker of all things. Huh? And then cause for the other 2 kinds of cause, form and end. Huh? But not every science will use all these 4 kinds of causes. Huh? Natural philosophy uses all 4, but not everyone does. So, if you want to be very strict in the use of these words, beginning is more general than cause, right? Cause is more general than element, right? But you can also use them almost synonymously, just like Aristotle, remember, in the metaphysics, used art or science for a knowledge that's universal, without distinguishing between art or science. And he refers you to the ethics, where he distinguishes them carefully, right? Okay? But here you can refer back to the metaphysics. You want to use the words very precisely. But you use them more loosely, right, to name any kinds of causes. Huh? Maybe they hint at there being different kinds of causes. Huh? Do you see that? Okay. And especially the element there in terms of matter, because Aristotle doesn't emphasize it here. When he says, and as far as its elements, he's hinting at the idea that natural philosophy goes what? Down into matter as it goes on, right? And it actually does that twice, we'll see in the whole natural philosophy. Okay? When you go from the 8 books of natural hearing to the book on the universe, and then to the books on generation and corruption, you're going down towards matter. Huh? And then again, you start with the 3 books about the soul, and you go down to studying later on the body more in detail. You're going down towards what? Matter. Which is just the reverse of what you do in wisdom. In wisdom, you go towards the what? Immaterial. Natural philosophy, you go towards matter. Just the opposite direction, huh? Okay. Now, when Aristotle says that we should first try to determine what the beginnings means, that what we know first, or will know first, is the beginnings or causes, right? But it's first in our intention what we're aiming at, right? We're aiming at knowing natural things by their causes, right? We're aiming at knowing natural things in the light of their causes, huh? We're aiming at knowing what natural things are and why they are the way they are, right? And both what and why, as explains in the posterior analytics, are answered by knowing the what? Cause, huh? Okay? So Thomas will refer back to the posterior analytics in explaining understanding and knowing why, right? And he takes it as referring to what Aristotle talks about in the second book of the posterior analytics. Understanding what and knowing why, huh? But they're both through knowing causes. Okay? Did I digest that, or are they too fast? Okay? So that's the first paragraph, huh? What we're aiming at, huh? Okay? We're aiming at knowing natural things in the light of their causes, huh? Okay? We're aiming at knowing what and why natural things are as they are, right? It's another way of saying we're aiming at knowing their causes. Because knowing what and knowing why is through knowing the cause. Okay? Now, the rest of the first reading is concerned with the order in which we should consider natural things and their causes. Okay? And the main thing Aristotle is going to say is that we should consider natural things and their causes in general before in what? Particular. Okay? Now, basically what he's going to do there is to give a reason why we should do that. And everything else is related to that reason. And we could state the reason in various forms. I often state it in the form of an if then syllogism. Okay? And this is the if then syllogism. If the confused is before the distinct in our knowledge, then the general is before the particular in our knowledge. Okay? So if the confused is before the distinct in our knowledge, then the general is before the particular in our knowledge. And then, but the confused, in fact, is before the distinct in our knowledge. Now, if you lay down those two statements, what follows necessarily?
The general is before the particular.
Okay.
In our knowledge.
Therefore, the general is before the particular in our knowledge. Okay? So that's going to be the central argument of the whole rest of this first reading, right? Okay? And everything else that he says is to back up something in an argument. Okay? Now, very often you find that one and sometimes both premises in a syllogism have to be backed up, right? But sometimes one of the premises is already known or it's kind of obvious, right? Okay? Now, of these two here, look at the first one here. If you know what we mean by confused and distinct, confused here now is not being used in the sense of being mixed up or mistaken, right? But confused in the sense of being what? Indistinct, right? Okay? I mean, separate those two senses for a moment, If I think that a dog is a cat, I'm mixed up, right? I'm mistaken, right? Okay. If I think a dog is an animal, am I mistaken? No. But in thinking that a dog is an animal, do I distinguish between a dog and a cat? No. See? So knowing that a dog is an animal is not to be mistaken, but it's not to have an altogether distinct knowledge of the dog. It's somewhat confused and determined, right? Right? By to say that a dog is a cat is to actually, be mistaken, huh? Okay? So when he says the confused before distinct, he means the indistinct, right? Not the mistake, huh? Okay? Now, isn't the general to the particular like the confused is to the distinct? If I know in general you're something. Well, I know you're a human being, right? Okay, you're a male human being, right? Okay? As I just said, I know from something to you're an animal to you're a human being, you're a male, and so on. I'm coming to know you more and more, what? Distinctly, aren't I? Okay? I don't identify the meaning of general and particular with confused and distinct. Confused and distinct is more general than general and particular. General and particular are merely one, what? Kind of confused and distinct. So if it's true that we know things in a confused way before we know them distinctly, and the general is to the particular as the confused is to the distinct, right? Right? To know something in general is not to know something as distinct as to know it in particular, right? To know that the cat is an animal is not as distinct as knowing it's a four-footed animal. And that's not as distinct as knowing it's a four-footed animal that meows and so on, right? Okay? You see the truth of the first premise here, right? You have done one? Okay. Now we'll meet other examples, other kinds of confused and distinct knowledge, right? In the same reading, right? But I mentioned here off the bat that these don't mean the same thing as those two, right? Okay? Confused and distinct is more general than general and particular. Okay? Do you see that? Okay? So Aristotle doesn't really try to manifest much this if-then statement, huh? Okay? If you understand what you mean by confused and distinct, what you mean by general and particular, you can see that general is to particular as the confused is to distinct, right? Okay. So like if I said, 4 is to 6 is 2 is to 3. Well, if 2 is before 3, then 4 is before 6, right? 4 and 6 aren't the same thing as 2 and 3, right? But if 4 is to 6 is 2 is to 3, and 2 is before 3, 4 must be before 6, right? Okay? So if the general is to the particular, as the confused is distinct, if that proportion is correct, right? Then if the confused is before the distinct, the general must be before the what? Particular. You see the force of the argument, or force of the statement, right? It's based upon seeing a proportion, right? The way I see it anyway. Okay? It also states the argument a little bit different to say that general and particular are one form of what? Confused and distinct, right? But you begin an argument from the second premise. Now, the rest of what he says is really devoted to this second premise. Huh? He's going to give a reason why we know the confused before the distinct, right? Okay? And this reason is very difficult to understand at first. Huh? It's a very profound reason. Huh? Okay? He's going to do that in that second paragraph. Huh? Okay? In the second paragraph, he's going to be giving the reason why we know things in a confused way before distinctly. But then, in the last 3 paragraphs, he's going to give 3 kinds of example to show that, in fact, we know the confused before the distinct. 3 kinds of example to show that, not why, but to show that we know the confused before the distinct. Okay? And we will be identifying those three kinds of examples, and under each kind we give infinity of examples to confirm what Aristotle said, right? Okay? Now usually I talk about the three kinds of examples because it's easier for people to see. And then we'll come back to this most difficult reason that he gives. Why? Okay? I think I mentioned how people write whole doctoral thesis on this one page. Right? Yes, especially that reason why involves so much labor, right? Okay? So let's look at the easier thing, the three kinds of examples first, to manifest that in fact we do know things that confused way before distinctly. Okay? So I'm going to erase this here, but you should have in mind how it revolves around this argument, right? And the reason for the second premise, the manifestation of the truth of the second premise here, by the three kinds of examples. Now, the first kind of example that Aristotle gives is from the sensible composed whole. Now, composed whole is the ordinary sense of whole. Composed means what? Put together, right? Okay? So, it's a whole put together from its parts, as opposed to the universal whole, which is not put together from its parts but instead of them. Okay? We touched upon that when we talked about division, if you remember. But he takes one that the senses know, right? A sensible composed whole, right? And he's going to exemplify in the sensible composed whole that we know such a whole in a confused way first, then later on more distinctly. We don't distinguish, in other words, the parts at first, right? But as time goes on, we start to do that. Okay? Now, let's take some example of that. Let's start with the sense of taste, right? Okay, let's take taste and smell. Now you take all kinds of examples. Let's take a salad dressing, right? Now sometimes people go to somebody's house and they're served a salad and they taste the salad dressing, this is good, you know? Or you go to a restaurant and you have a kind of unusual salad dressing and you ask your hostess or waiter, what do you use in your salad dressing? This is very good. You know? I heard people say it, haven't you? But you said sometime, right? Okay. Now what does that show about your knowledge of the salad dressing?
Came to the senses.
Huh?
That it came to the senses.
Yeah, but what kind of knowledge do you have of the salad dressing that you just enjoyed and you say, what do you use in there?
Taste.
You don't know the parts in it, how it was made.
Yeah, and you can't distinguish the parts, right? See? You have an indistinct knowledge of it, huh? Okay. I have a friend who's a kind of a wine connoisseur, see? And cook and chef and so on. So he goes to Paris, right? He goes to one of these fancy restaurants, and they serve you this piece of meat with a wine sauce on it, right? It's delicious, but what do they use? Well, it won't do any good to ask them, because that's the secret of the house, right? That's their 2-star or 3-star, whatever it is. And they don't want to make a spy for the opposition, right? So he tasted and tried to pick out what it was. Then go back to his apartment and try to duplicate that sauce. You get something that resembled it, but not exactly the same, right? Then when he had enough money, he'd go back and order the exact same meal again. And go back to the exact thing. What does that show about this guy? Even though he's got a wonderful sense of taste that he's got. Takes him time, right? To pick out what's being used in that sauce, huh? One time I had a recipe for a Marchand de Vin sauce, right? So I'm going to try this Marchand de Vin sauce from France. So So there's three of us in the kitchen now. My mother and my sister-in-law, Dolores, and myself. And my sister-in-law and myself making the sauce, and others doing everything else. So it's complicated, right? Not very good though, right? See? But a lot of ingredients there, right? And it takes time to be able to pick them out. Take a third example in the sense of taste or smell. In California, if you have the name of the grape on the bottle of wine, right, the law specifies the percentage of that grape it has to have in it. It's almost all entirely that grape. Huh? It has a name on it. But then if they have a generic name like Burgundy, right, that doesn't have to have any particular grape in it. And so the different vineyards will use what? A mixture of different grapes in the bottle of Burgundy or Claret or something. And it'll be unique to each house, right? Depending on what grapes they have and what combination they think tastes good and so on. But from the same house, it will cost less than one with the name of the grape on it. Okay? So my brother Mark was a great wine connoisseur, as you know. He didn't want tasting one of these wines, and he said, "What are you using there?" The guy was being kind of cagey, won't tell my brother Mark was using. So Marcus, no. He starts to tell the guy what's in there. And pretty soon the guy said, "Come on to the back room," he says, "taste some of these combinations and see which one you think is the best." You see? But my brother Mark said he couldn't do that when he first went out to California, right? You couldn't pick up a glass and just tell the ingredients, huh? Here's that story of Ron MacArthur there. He had a dinner, I guess, and he had a different wine in a fancy bottle. Nobody knew it but my brother Mark. Mark said, "This is not this." It deceived me and everybody else, you know? Okay. Now, let's take another sense. Take the ear. When you first hear the symphony playing as a whole, right? This is pleasing to the ear, but does your ear pick out all the different instruments? Huh? No. There's a famous piece by a British composer in the 20th century there, Benjamin Britten. It's called Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. You've probably heard that. He starts out when the orchestra plays this magnificent theme from Purcell, and then he breaks it down. The strings play all by themselves, and then the woodwinds play by themselves, and the percussion by themselves. And at the end, he combines it all. And so you have what? Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. You see what he's doing? He's giving you a more distinct knowledge of the instruments playing together. Okay? I've noticed with the Mozart aria, right? My ear is naturally drawn to the human voice singing. And I trained my ear to listen to the musical accompaniment because of the nice combination there to get the full effect of it, right? But I liked very much this aria I heard years ago, Non più di fiore, from Clemenza di Tito. And only recently I found out that the musical accompaniment is using the bass horn. Because I got some pieces of music by Mozart written for the bass horn. And it's kind of an unusual instrument that was kind of fashioned on those days, but it's a very interesting sound. And that's what he uses inside. Oh my goodness, you know. So it was a great discovery for me, you see. It took me years to sort this out a bit, right? You see, so that's kind of pointed out to me. You see that? So what are you hearing at first? You're hearing the whole, all the sounds going in your ear, but you're not really picking out the instruments. When I first was hearing Mozart's Jupiter Symphony, right, his last symphony, and my music educator friend says, "You know what he does at the end of the fourth movement?" I said, "What does he do?" I know exactly what to do. He combines 5 melodies together. I said, "He does?" I don't know how many times I heard it, right? See? But he goes through these different melodies, and then at the end, right, he combines them, you know, and he gives it away, you know. Wow, you know that, see? Or Don Giovanni at the ballroom scene, I got 2 different kinds of dances, right? So just to combine them without any conflict. It's kind of an amazing thing, right? See? So when I hear these things, what am I hearing? I'm hearing it indistinctly at first, aren't I? I'm not distinguishing the various instruments or the various things that are being combined together. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, the same thing is true for the eye, isn't it? When you go into the museum there and you see this beautiful painting on the wall, you stand back, you come in, you see the whole painting at once. But do you notice all the details at first? No. And remember, I had a painting when I first came to Worcester. Just got down for $1 on these prints, of a canal scene, right?
Uh-huh.
And I used to, get dressed as one side of the room, and I kind of look at the picture, looking down the canal. One day I'm on the other side of the room, I look at the thing, I'm still looking down the canal. And it just seems to follow you right around.
Yeah.
And there are paintings where the eyes of the painting seem to follow you as you move along. I think the painting is almost alive. But I remember when I was a freshman in college, in kind of an English class, and one day the professor came in and he had a reproduction of a famous painting. And it was a Blessed Virgin, but anyway, he put it on the easel right here, on the blackboard in front of the class. He says, okay, take out a piece of paper. You got 50 minutes to describe that painting. It's out of blue, right? Oh, some guy said, I just sat there and studied the painting for about 20 minutes, not writing a single word. But as I studied the painting, I noticed the way the painter had done the lips of the woman, right? And how revealing this was of her character. See? Abstemious and so on, right? How revealing the lips are, right? The way the painter does them. So I noted these subtle things. I got an A for my paper saying, But what was the mistake of trying to write about that painting the first time you see it?
You're not looking at
it's got a new shawl on. Big deal, But he was struck by my, what I said about the lips and how it's revealed the character of the woman being portrayed. You see? But I couldn't notice that detail unless I had studied it without writing for about half of the time I had to write. You see that? So, you can multiply these examples more and more if you want to, but you see the idea now, right? Okay. Here you have a whole that is known by the eye or by the ear, or by taste or smell. But when you first know it, you don't distinguish the parts, right? As time goes on, you start to distinguish and notice the parts one by one, right? Okay? So this is the first kind of example he uses to show that we know things, in fact, in a confused way before distinctly. And he starts with this example because our knowledge starts with our what? Senses, right? Okay? And this is the kind of whole that the senses know. Now the second kind of example he takes is also a composed whole, but, as Thomas says, an understandable composed whole. He's thinking now the definition of the thing, right? The definition is something the reason or the understanding knows. The senses don't define things. And he's comparing the knowledge we have when we can name something to the knowledge we have when we can what? Define it, right? Okay. He takes the example there of the circle, right? Okay. And, when someone can identify what is a circle, like the clock is circular, the child might say, right? But the child would not be able to what? Define the circle as a plane figure contained by one line, every point of which is equidistant. Point is here called the center. Okay? Now my children, when they went to grade school, they all came back one day with a piece of paper that had a circle on it, and a triangle on it, and a square, and oblong and so on. And they said, Daddy, Mama, that's a circle, that's a triangle, that's a square, right? But if they ask them, what is a circle? That's a circle, that's a circle. They don't come out with a definition, do they? See? And it would take some time before one could actually what? Spell it out in a definition. That's square. But they don't spell, you see, they look at, what's a square? That's square. They don't come out and say what? Playing, quadrilateral, equilateral, and right angled quadrilateral? No. You see? So the child, in some confused way, knows what a circle is and a triangle and a square because he can identify these, right? But he can't spell it out the way a definition does, huh? You read 150 of Shakespeare's sonnets, right? These are sonnets, but it takes a while to think about the definition of sonnet, huh? It's a likeness of thought and feeling, right? In 14 lines of iambic pentameter, divided into 3 quatrains with alternate rhyming and completed by rhyming couplet. That's what it is. See? But you can read, 150 sonnets without being able to define it, right? Recognize it. If you ask a little child, what is a nose? Say, that's a nose, that's a nose. You point to it, right? You won't say, it's an organ, the 2 nostrils and the cartilage and all this, right? So as a child, you went to your father and mother, maybe you ran across a word you didn't understand. And maybe your mother and father used that word correctly, so they have some understanding of it. When you're asked to define it, your father or mother has to kind of what? Scratch their head, right? In love and friendship course, I asked in the beginning, what is love? Someone says, the feeling. Well, so's anger, so's fear. See? But even a chair, what is a chair? What is a chair? Something to sit on? Yeah, but not everything you sit on is a chair. Not everything is made to sit on as a chair. So you have to stop and think out carefully what a definition of a chair is. There's a bench or a sofa. It's not a chair, but it's something to sit on, right? Yeah. So notice we have the second kind of example, but it's less known to us than the first kind. The first kind is the whole consensus note, right? The second kind is the kind that only reason knows. Okay? But notice it's similar in that it's composed of parts, right? It's put together from its parts. So you can multiply these examples. I'll take circle like Aristotle does, or square, or nose, or chair, any of these, right? Okay. So we name things, as we said in logic, usually before we can define them. Okay. And when we ask for the definition, we use the name so we have some understanding, but not the distinct understanding we seek through the definition. Now the third kind of example is the one which is most like, in some ways, what he wants to show here, that we know the general before the particular. There's something like that in the senses, and Thomas will call it the more universal sensible and the more general sensible. And in the commentary, he'll say you can take this in place or in distance and in time. And there's obviously an example in time. Let's take an example in place. You're with Christopher Columbus, right? And you're sailing in the ocean, right? And you're looking for what? Land, right? And Columbus had actually a reward for the first man to see land, right? So everybody is what? Apart from the reward, they're very anxious to find land, right? Mm-hmm. And you see something off on the horizon, someone says, land! And it turned out to be what?
A whale.
A cloud coming up, right? Okay? Or sometimes there's vegetation floating in the surface of the water, right? But not solid land, right? Okay? What are you seeing at first then, right? Are you seeing an island? Are you seeing a cloud? Or are you seeing something floating in the water? What is it?
Shining above water.
It's not distinct, is it? Or in the old days, you've probably seen this in the old movies there. you're out at sea and you see a ship, something on the horizon, right? It's a ship. Now, is it a friendly ship or a pirate ship, right? And the flag goes up, with the crossbows and so on. The flag goes up with the enemy country or something, right? What are you seeing? You seeing a pirate ship at first? Or is it a friendly ship or an enemy ship, right? You see something on the horizon, right? Okay. And this is a bit like going from the general particular. Huh? There's something on the horizon. It's a ship. It's a pirate ship. It's Captain Kidd's ship, right? Do you see that? Or I see it way out there in the, in the Western movies there. You see something on the hill, on the cliff over there, right? There's something up there, yeah. Yeah, it seems to be moving, yeah. Yeah. It's a dog, yeah. Oh, it's Joe's dog. Or Joe's horse, or whatever it is, right? There's something. Yeah, something moving. It's a dog, right? It's Joe's dog. It's like, very much like going from the general to the particular, isn't it? Do you see that? Okay. Now, Aristotle takes the example here, which might be even more clear in his the Greek household. In the Greek household, there are many men, right? In the nobility, right? And many women, right? And the man or the woman that attends to you might not even be your what? Your father, right? Or your what? Mother, right? So the children call all men father, right? And all women mother, but afterwards what? Separate each of these, huh? Okay? When I was first teaching this at St. Mary's College there in California, went to the supermarket in the afternoon, right? And this mother comes by with her little kid in the grocery cart, like they have a little seat there, in the grocery cart. And as she goes by, the little kid says, "Daddy!" Oh. So I started laughing, and the mother started laughing a little bit. And so she said something about my resemblance to the father, right? But that kid was confused, right? It was this in a courtroom or something. But yeah, sometimes had a kid run up to you in a crowd, right? And they're frightened and looking for their mother or father, and they run up to you like you were their daddy, right? See? So temporarily, right? They think you're their daddy, and they're what? Mistaken, right? You can see this with twins. When I was in grade school, we had two girls who were twins, Judy and Mary Jane Van Valkenburg. And those of us who were, say, when the first grade with Judy and Mary Jane could easily tell them apart, right? Always, it's not Judy like that looking at Mary Jane. But when we got into the next grade, the sister, teacher, could not tell Judy and Mary Jane apart. See? And so she'd have a seating chart, and you were assigned a seat. You had to always sit on the same seat. And so she put Judy over here and Mary Jane over here, and Judy and Mary Jane with what? We thought, oh boy, we're pulling something off on the Sisters of St. Joseph. And but you see, those of us who had been that year before, right, could easily tell the two apart, right? But the new teacher could not tell them apart. You see? What does that show? See, you're knowing them in a confused way at first, right? You remember maybe the family resemblance, but not the other, right? And sometimes, I've complimented one sister on what the other sister's performance was, because they looked so much alike, and I just don't know them very well. So that was a wonderful performance, That's my sister. Kind of embarrassed, because of this, But you can't tell them apart, Sometimes sisters who look alike very much, when they're having their first couple of dates with a couple of guys, they sometimes switch dates. They don't know to do that, right? And the guys don't know it, right? Say, I'll get your boyfriend tonight, and he takes mine. Now, I assume by the time that they know these girls well enough to get married, they can tell them apart. But when they first going out, they can't tell them apart, When I was a little boy there, we had kind of a neighborhood grocery store. It had been started by a man from France, actually, and when he died, his two daughters took over the store and ran it. And my mother's always sending me down to get a quart of milk or something, and sending me coffee, and talk to one of the sisters and tell her what to give me when I get to the store, right? And so she said, now when you go to the store, go to Germaine and she'll have it, right? Well, I couldn't tell the two apart, but my mother could, see, because she had been doing business with these two sisters for some time, right? So what am I seeing when I see these two sisters, huh? Right? What was the teacher seeing when she saw Judy or Mary Jane? Something in a way more general, right? Van Valkenburg girl, let's say, right? But not Judy or Mary Jane, right, in particular, huh? One couple we know in the parish here, they have twin boys, and I can't tell them apart. One day after Mass, my wife grabbed the two of them and said, okay, let's stand here, and she studied them, right, so she could, but you have to study them, right, to see, so you can tell apart the two. But their parents have no difficulty in telling them apart, huh? But to me, it's a complete mystery. Who's who, right? So I have to really study them, right? You see that? Yeah. So, my brother Mark was a student in Quebec. He did it one time with a French family. Family actually from Paris. That the old man introduced him to Charlet, right? You know Charlet. Anyway, they had a little boy, and one time their brother's looking at a magazine there on the sofa, the little boy's kind of sitting next to looking on it. And finally come to a picture of Audrey Hepburn. They were crying, and my brother Mark says to the boy, who's that? He says, Mama. See? Well, my brother and sister, not the resemblance, right? But the little boy said, Mama. What is he saying? He's confused, right? Huh? See? It's something like the reason knowing the general. All right? It's very much like what the reason does, huh? Okay. Going back to the first kind of example Aristotle gives there, right? Aristotle shows you two ways of proceeding from this. The fact that the whole is more known by sense than the parts exemplifies that we know things in a confused way before distinctly, right? And that's going to be the reason why we should go from the general to the particular, right? Okay? But then he makes a direct comparison between the two in the second sentence, right? And the general is a kind of whole, since the general takes in many things as parts. Huh? And that's what he's doing there. Huh? He's using this not only to exemplify the general proposition that the confused is more known to us than the distinct, which would be the reason for saying that we should know something in general or do know in general for a particular. But he'll say that the general is to the particular, or particulars, something like a whole is to what? Parts, huh? Okay? And sometimes they call the general the universal whole, right? As opposed to the composed whole, right? But notice how the word particular is taken from the word what? Part. That's kind of assigned. It's like parts, right? Okay. And in Greek, the Greek word for general here is kapalou. We get the word Catholic, by the way. Huh? Okay. But kapalou is running together two words in Greek, kata and holos, according to the whole, right? So the Greek word for general is taken from the Greek word for whole. Just like the English word particular is taken from the English word for part, right? And so we call this sometimes the universal whole. The universal whole is said of its parts, but not put together from them. The composed whole is put together from its parts, but not said of them, right? Okay. But the general is the particular, something like the whole is the parts, right? So if we know the whole before we distinguish the parts, then we would know the general before we distinguish the what? Particulars, huh? Okay? It shows you two ways to proceed from the sensible composed whole to this thing we want to reason out, right? That the general is before the particular. One is by this comparison, or we just explained it, right? Where you read things directly, you might say, from the whole being known before the parts to the general being known before the particulars, right? That's analogous, right? Or he uses this to manifest the confused is before the distinct, right? Which is the general reason for the general before the particular, right? So, you see that? So it's very concrete, these examples that Aristotle was giving, right? The example of the circle, I always think of my children coming home from their kindergarten with a circle on a piece of paper, right? And you ask, they tell you, this is a circle, they recognize it, huh? But they can't define it. You see? That's common, huh? There's the old saying there that every Chinaman looks the same. But vice versa, we look all the same to them, right? You know? So you don't know what particular race of people very much, they all look the same, more or less, and you can't tell them apart, right? But they are as distinct to each other as we are to each other, right? Yeah.
What almost amazes me, Father Francis will tell. He can tell the difference between the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Vietnamese by the slant in their eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm completely lost. To me, they are all the Orientals.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
all of them like me. I can't tell anything.
I'll see somebody in church on Sunday with a little girl, a very cute little girl, I know if she's Chinese or Japanese, you know. She's adopted, I can tell that, you know, her mother's not Oriental, but I don't know whether she's Chinese or Japanese or Korean or what she is, you know, but, you know. Sweet little thing. Okay. So you see the three kinds of examples then, right? So on the exam, I tell the students, I might ask you, what are the three kinds of examples that he uses to show this? And you got to identify the kind of example, but also be able to give examples underneath that kind, right? Okay. But again, Aristotle very briefly here. You could go on getting as many examples you want to give under each kind, right? Okay. Any questions then about that? Now, once in the end, you have to point out, he begins with the sensible whole because that's where our knowledge begins with the senses. Then he goes to the understandable, right, composed whole, which is less known to us. He ends up with this more general sensible, because that's very much like what he's ultimately interested in. He's leading up to the idea we should therefore know natural things in general before in particular, right? You ever heard this? It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's Superman. You hear that? See? And no, when the person says it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's Superman. What are they seeing? Are they seeing Superman at first? No. They're seeing something flying or going through the sky, but whether it's a bird or an airplane, their hesitation there shows that they don't yet know distinctly what it is going through the sky. Can you see that? Yeah. And that's an example of the more general sensible in distance or in place, right? As opposed to in time, but it's similar.
And would that be sensible, but it's really something in your imagination that is being developed?
We're talking about the senses there. We're talking about when I see up in the sky going through, like, you know, sometimes I don't know sure it's up there in the sky sometimes, you know. You know, is it an airplane or something else, right? You know, so you kind of, you know, or bird, what is up there, right? See? So you're seeing it in a confused way. You're not seeing it distinctly as a satellite or a plane or something else.
I was thinking of the examples like the sisters or something. My eyes are...
Yeah, but again, I don't see the distinction, you know, between the two sisters, huh? Okay. I just see the family resemblance there. So I'm not really seeing Judy Van Valkenburg. I'm seeing the Van Valkenburg maybe family in some way, but not her indistinctly. I say that new teacher couldn't tell them apart for a woman. So they could switch. See? Or like the girls, they say, switching their dates or something like that, right? The guys have 1 or 2 dates with these girls, they can't tell them apart. See? Eventually they would be able to, right? But it takes time before they have that distinct knowledge, huh? Okay. Are you puzzled by that or not?
I'm just trying to figure out what it seems that it's not your eyes really that is getting anything more. It's more something in your.
Well, no, I have to use my eyes to study their faces more. See, right? Like I said, my wife, she grabs those 2 twins after mass there, and stand there down, and what's your name? What's your name? And then it's little things on their face that are different, right? You see. No markings, there's something that's different you'll see, right? But you would notice that I can't tell apart. I can, grab them like that again first.
Yeah. Or just like say that one has a freckle or something. It's not like your eye didn't see that freckle, but you just didn't notice it with your.
Yeah. Well, I had this last year. I had 2 girls who were I guess they're kind of twins really there. And I had one the first semester, one the second semester, right? And then when I walk in campus and one says hello, I don't know which one it is, I say hello, I mean, if I can. But I had, different semesters, I didn't really, got to know them that distinctly, so, I know it's one of the 2, but which one it is, I don't know. You see? Okay.
This college tells us story. This girl came up to him and says, "Are you or your brother?"
Okay. Now let's go back to the reason he gives here in the second paragraph. Now what you're going to have here is an example of that distinction that we spoke of before. Simply and in some respect, what is so fully and completely and what is so in some imperfect, diminished way, right? Okay. Aristotle is saying that these are not the same thing. What is more known to us and what is more known simply. He also uses the phrase by nature, right? Okay? But it doesn't mean that nature knows it, right? It means more known simply, huh? He says these 2 are not the same thing. And we have to go from what is more known to us towards what is more known simply. Okay? As if more known to us means something, imperfect in the way of knowing, huh? Okay? Now, what does this mean, huh? Now, the other side of the coin is that what is more known is less known to us. And that what is more known to us is less known. Okay? Now, what does that mean, huh? Well, let's give me a glass of red wine there, okay? And you say no. Smell it, Berquist, taste it, okay? What do you have here? Huh? Dry red wine. What kind? What grape? What grape? Cabernet Sauvignon, huh? Well, that's for sure about anything Cabernet Sauvignon, right? As I am, that's a dry red wine, right? One north or south of the bay. Okay. The more precise or distinct I try to be, right, the less sure I am. It's more known to me that this is a dry red wine than it's a Cabernet Sauvignon. And it's more known to me that it's a Cabernet Sauvignon, if it's known at all, than that it's one from Napa Valley or something in California, right? Okay? But is the beverage there in the glass more known when it's known to be a dry red wine or when it's known to be Cabernet Sauvignon? It's more fully or perfectly known when it's known to be Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, from this vineyard and so on, right? But it's less known to me. You see the idea? Mm-hmm. See? What he's saying here, right? Okay. Now, I was going to apply that then to confused and distinct, right? But in the Nicomachean Ethics, he applies it to our knowledge of cause and effect, right? Okay. Which is more known to us, day and night, or the cause of day and night?
Day and night.
Yeah. And we agree with the ancients that there's day and night. We agree about the effect, but we disagree about the cause, maybe, huh? We think that the Earth turns on its axis, and they may have thought that the sun goes around the Earth, right? Huh? Okay. Historians might agree that the French Revolution took place, right? But disagree as to the cause of it, right? So the effect is more known to us than the cause, and a sign of that is a disagreement more about the cause than about the effect, right? Okay? But when is an effect fully or completely known? When is an effect completely or fully understood?
When the cause is known.
Yeah. Okay? But we know more, right, the effect by itself, than we know the effect in light of its cause. There's all kinds of things that we don't know the cause at all, right? Okay? So we know the effect more by itself than in the light of its cause. But where is it fully known? Only in the light of its cause, huh? Do you see that? So, now if you see by induction, like from these three kinds of examples, that we in fact know things more in a confused way than distinctly, right? Or you see by induction that we know usually the effect before the cause and often ignorant of the cause, right? You can see kind of inductively there the truth of what Aristotle is saying here, right? Because obviously the effect is fully known, completely known, huh? Perfectly known, right? Say more fully known or more perfectly known. The effect is more fully known when it's known in the light of its cause, right? But we know the effect more by itself, huh? And are often uncertain and disagreement about the cause. You see? Or something is known fully and completely, perfectly, when it's known distinctly, right? But we know it more in a what? Confused way, right? So what is more known to us? What we're more sure about? I'm more sure I'm drinking dry red wine than I'm drinking Cabernet Sauvignon, right? And more sure I'm drinking Cabernet Sauvignon that it's from Napa Valley. Okay? Do you see that? So what is more known to me, and therefore more certain, right, is actually what is less known. See? Okay? To know something in a confused way is to still be somewhat in the dark, isn't it? As you go from the confused towards the distinct, is like going from darkness towards light, huh? In the same way you go from the effect to the cause, you're being illuminated, right? See? But we know things in a dark way, right? More than clearly in the light, huh? Okay? You see a little bit of what he's saying there, huh? Now, what is the basic reason why? You can go back to the reason for this too, right? Okay? And Thomas touches upon the reason which Aristotle gives in the ninth book of Wisdom, huh? It goes back to the very nature of senses and our reason, that they are our senses and our reason are able to know before they actually know, right? So to go from being able to know to actually knowing something, you go from ignorance to complete or perfect knowledge all at once? Or do you go to the intermediate step where something is incompletely, imperfectly known? Aristotle compares the human mind in the beginning to a piece of paper on which nothing is written. And you start to take notes or something, the paper doesn't fill up all at once, but gradually, right? Okay? Or if you're filling your glass with beer or something, right? You don't go from empty to full at once, right? But to partially full, right? Before it's really full, right? So for man, in both his senses and his reason, to go from ignorance to imperfect knowledge towards perfect knowledge, right? So imperfect knowledge naturally comes for us before what? Perfect knowledge. And what corresponds to imperfect knowledge is the imperfectly known. What corresponds to perfect knowledge, what is completely or fully or perfectly known. Okay? Do you see that? Now, to some extent, that's true of every kind of education, something analogous or proportional to that. Because in any kind of education, you are developing something, right? And therefore you're going from the imperfect towards the perfect, right? So in any kind of education, what is imperfect comes before what is what? Perfect. Take, for example, physical education, right? When I was in Canada, we used to get the 5BX plan, Royal Canadian Air Force, little exercise book, right? Now, what you see in these books is you have a series of exercises, and they're gradated, right? Okay? Now, the exercises that you can perform at first, are they as productive of strength as when you perform later on? No. Maybe at the beginning you're doing 5 push-ups, right? Okay? Maybe at the top of the chart you're doing 50 push-ups, right? Okay? Now, is doing 5 push-ups as productive of strength as doing 50? No. But for me, in the beginning, to do 50 would be what? Impossible, right? I might even physically, harm myself, right? See, I had to build up to that gradually, right? So doing 5 push-ups is more productive of strength for me than doing 50, right? But doing 50 push-ups is more productive of strength than doing 5. You see? So what is more productive of strength for me is less productive of strength. Right? Because I'm starting out with something imperfect and building up to something more perfect, right? Do you see how it's analogous to this? Okay. In the same way in the education of taste, which is going to strike the imagination of the child more. Little Red Riding Hood or King Lear by William Shakespeare. Yeah, the fairy tale is going to strike his imagination, right? But is there as much for the imagination in the fairy tale as there is in Shakespeare? See? Well, eventually you exhaust, right, the fairy tale, right? But people are never, exhaust Shakespeare as far as imagination is concerned. Okay? So Shakespeare's plays are more imaginable than the fairy tale. But the fairy tale in the beginning is more imaginable for us. You see? Because your imagination has to develop, right? The child might appreciate the plain food, the hot dog or something, right? More than that Marchand Vance wine sauce, right? But there's more to taste than that, right? When I was a little boy, I thought my father was a very foolish man. He did not fill the refrigerator with soda pop, you know? Now, with his money, he could have orange and grape and root beer and all the rest of the wonderful soda pops. And he could drink soda pop all day long. And, but now with dry red wine, they probably go, "Ooh, this is bitter," That's what they call dry rather than bitter. But is there as much to taste in that soda pop as there is in the dry red wine and the Cabernet? If a dry red wine, to be refrigerated, because you'll be able to taste it, right? But if you let Coke come down to more like room temperature or cellar temperature, well, just spit it out. There's no taste to it, right? You see? So notice the sense of taste there. What is more tasty, more tasteable, is less tasteable by us at first. What is more tasty is less tasty to us, right? And so it graduates the child's sense of taste develops. Now, the same thing true about music. When I was a little boy, I was always trying to find a march on the radio. Turn the dial to find a march. Grew up against 36, the Second World War. I just want to hear a march. I still like marches, but I don't think there's much to hear in a march as there is in a Mozart symphony or a Mozart, the Magic Flute or something, right? Okay? There's more in the ear, more to be heard. You see? But it's less heard by me, right? Everybody loves a parade, right? Yeah. See? Not everybody loves opera or most opera. As Virginia Woolf said there about seeing performance, hearing performance, I want you to figure out it's a vindication of opera. But I remember my brothers bringing home the Magic Flute, and I'm a docile person, and I listened to the whole Magic Flute, but I don't really think I heard anything. But as I kept hearing Mozart more, I realized more and more to be heard here, right? That's very interesting, Now I play Mozart almost exclusively, There's much to be heard in Mozart. But at first I could hear it. Do you see? Yeah. So in the education of taste, the child might like the little drawing in his little book, more than the great painting in the museum. But the great painting museum, you can go back and look at it again and again and again, right? See more in it, So the education of taste, whether it be the tongue in food or the eye in painting or the ear in music, what is more tasteable is less tasteable to us in the beginning, right? Now, the same thing true about the education of love. What is more loved by us in the beginning? Well, it's a sensible good, right? Rather than the understandable good, right? Spiritual good, Which is more loved by us in the beginning? Private good or the common good, See? Well, in the beginning, the private good is more lovable by us than the common good. The sensible good, right, is more lovable by us than the understandable or spiritual good, And so the education consists of leading people from those things, right, which are more lovable to them, to the things which are more lovable, the things which are better, more good, After the Second World War, when Eisenhower was still in Berlin, he'd have meetings with the Russian General Zhukov, right? And they'd talk about the American way of life and the Russian, And Zhukov would say to Eisenhower, you guys, you work for your own profits, Over in Russia, we expect people to work for the common good of the economic good of the country. Isn't it much more noble than working for your own profit? Eisenhower said he didn't know how to answer that exactly. Well, you can't answer it by saying that the private good is better than the common good. Obviously, the economic common good of the country is a greater thing than the private good, your profit, right? But the point is, you have to be led from what is more, loved by you, maybe the private good, to the common good, right? When you come back, the Russians were doing that too, right? Because they were giving the reward of Lenin, people who produce a lot, and people who squandered things, they were punishing by death and so on, right? So in fact, they were appealing to the private good and the private evil people to get them to pursue the common good. But we just do it better. The profit is better than this way that they have doing it. You see? But, the proper answer would have been not to say or to deny that the common economic good of the country is a greater good than the profit of this man, right? But you got to be led from your private good to the common good, huh? See the connection between the two, huh? And I see that sometimes as businessmen, right? A businessman might go and become, remember the Chamber of Commerce, right? And he might do things for the business community as a whole, or even things for the good of the city, right? And this makes him, more known in the city, right? It helps his own company and business, right? And he becomes a respected businessman, right? But after a while, you see these men, they get a certain love of the good of the city apart from their own benefit, right? And even after they're retired sometimes in their company and they're not, directly related to that at all, they still try to do things for the city, right? So they've been educated, right? They've been led from the private good to the common good, huh? In that formula, the act of contrition that I learned as a child, right? I dread the loss of heaven and the pains of hell. But most of all, because of offended by God. It goes from your private good, right? Private evil, to what? The common good, which is God Himself, right? See? But you have to be led from what is more lovable to us in the beginning to what is really more lovable, right? You heard the life there of St. Rose of Lima, right? Young man became interested in her because she was a good-looking woman, apparently, St. Rose of Lima, right? But it was dangerous to tell her she was good-looking because she'd go off and disfigure herself, But anyway, the young man was attracted first, you might say, to the outside of St. Rose of Lima, right? Okay. Is this what was most lovable? Huh? It was Lima? No. It's the inward things that are more lovable in her. But the outward things are more lovable by us in the beginning, right? But then as he got to know Rose of Lima, she became his spiritual director in a sense, right? His spiritual guide, right? So he became holy, right? In his own right, huh? But he was first attracted to the outward beauty of St. Rose of Lima, huh? I think you find that sometimes. They always first remark about Socrates, right? Socrates has a reputation of being the ugliest man in Athens. And you read the symposium there, and Alcibiades praises him, right? Huh? On the outside, he's this ugly man, right? But the inside, there's this, virtue and wisdom and so on, right? Huh? So he's kind of transformed into the handsomest man in Athens, huh? But the outside is nothing, right? But I think some of these stories like Beauty and the Beast and so on, right, where you have to, in a sense, know the person inwardly before you can know their outward beauty, right? Kind of a lesson there, right? See, because we're normally attracted to the outside at first, right? And then only gradually you see something else that's more lovable. And Belmont is a lady richly left, right? No, she's talking about her. She's wealthy, right? And she is fair. And fairer than that fair of wondrous virtue, right? See? Was she most lovable for her wealth? No, we mentioned that first, right? Then her what? Bodily beauty, right? And then last, her virtue, right? Huh? No. And Belmont is a lady richly left. And she is fair. And fairer than that fair of wondrous virtue, right? But notice the build up there, right? But fairer than that fair, right? The beauty of the soul is more than the beauty of the body, right? Huh? But the beauty of the body is loved by us before, right? So in the symposium, the ascent, in beauty starts out from what? The love of a beautiful body, right? To the love of all beautiful bodies, right? Then you get up to the love of the what? A virtue in the soul and so on, right? All the way up to the beautiful itself is God. Okay? So what is more loved by us at first is less lovable. What's more lovable to us is less lovable. And what is more lovable is less lovable to us, in the beginning at least, right? Okay? So you have an education of love, an education of the heart, and an education of taste, right? And then the education of taste, all the senses of taste. And the education of the body, this education, In all of these, you're going from the imperfect towards perfect, right? So what comes before for us is always something imperfect, huh? Okay? So what is more noble to us is less noble. God is the most noble thing there is. He's the most actual thing there is. But he's least noble to us, right? So, this is the reason then that Aristotle gives why we know things in a confused way before we know them distinctly. Because what is more known to us is less what? Known. And what is less known to us is the more known, right? Or you can say it with the other word, noble. What is more noble by us is less noble. And what is less noble by us is more noble. So I could write a whole doctoral thesis on that, right? But it's a very, very profound thing that he has there.
The first sentence where he says that the road is inborn.
Yeah, it's a natural road. Huh?
Natural, yeah.
We've talked in here before about the natural first road, right? I'll give you, I think of it next time, a kind of a summary of the natural road, huh? Because this idea of the confused before the distinct is one aspect of the natural road, right? And the one he's emphasizing right here, but I'll give you kind of a complete picture of the natural road. I'll give you something next time, okay? Now, at this point, I'm going to give you something here on confused and distinct here. Got some more time here. Yeah. I don't want, you want to need one of these two, didn't you? From last time you said? You need 10 copies, right? Yeah. So what? Yeah. Okay, that's right. Okay. Now, we're going to make a kind of an excursion here, right? Okay. Aristotle comes at the end of the so-called golden age of Greek philosophy. And the golden age of Greek philosophy begins around 600 BC. And it comes to an end with the death of Aristotle in 322 BC. Huh? Okay. And you see what he said here about the confused and the distinct, right? That the confused is more known to us, and therefore we're more sure or more certain about it. Huh? Now Descartes, who is sometimes called the father of modern philosophy, Descartes' dates are roughly, 1596 to 1650, right? So roughly the first half of the 17th century. But Descartes is often called the father of modern philosophy. And in his, one of the most famous works, The Discourse and Method, he seems to be saying just the opposite of what Aristotle said. Okay? And this is a very striking dichotomy, right? And in this Discourse and Method, Descartes gives a number of rules. He's going to forget about logic, and that's too messy, you know. But he's going to go down to 4 little rules that he gives there. And he says, the first of these was to accept nothing as true which I did not clearly recognize to be so. That is to say, carefully to avoid precipitation, prejudice, and judgments, and to accept in them nothing more than what was presented to my mind so clearly and distinctly that I could have no occasion to doubt it. Huh? Okay? Well, there Descartes seems to be saying that the distinct is more, more known to us, right? We're more sure of that, right? So Descartes, in a way, is identifying certitude with clarity and distinction. And Aristotle is doing just the reverse, right? He's identifying certitude more with the confused or indistinct. This is a very fundamental disagreement about something very fundamental. Okay? And the question is, who's correct? Huh? Yeah. Now, the reason that Aristotle gives is pretty clear. In fact, I put Aristotle's reason in the form of syllogism. What is more known to us is more what? Certain for us. Huh? And the confused is more known to us than the distinct. Therefore, the confused is more certain, right? Okay? That's Aristotle's reason. Now, Descartes doesn't give clearly a reason, right, for what he's saying, but he is, if you read the whole Discourse and Method, he wants to proceed everywhere like you do in mathematics, right? And basically, I think the reason behind Descartes is what we would call a third figure entity, huh? And it would be that mathematics is more distinct than the other sciences, and mathematics is more certain. So he takes mathematics as a sign that the more distinct is more what? Certain, right? See? And even, Plato and Aristotle would agree, and Thomas would agree, that mathematics is the most certain of the sciences for us. Huh? Okay? Geometry, arithmetic. And likewise, it seems clear that mathematics is more distinct, huh? Isn't what a triangle is more distinct to you than what love is? What friendship is, and what the soul is, right? Okay? So, mathematics is a sign that certitude and distinction go together, right? Right? Okay? Of course, he may also partly be influenced by a bad argument, which would be that the word confused is equivocal, right? And confused can mean what? Mixed up, mistaken, right? If Aristotle meant by confused, mixed up, mistaken, it would be stupid to say that we know more what are mixed up and don't know. Right? But as we pointed out, that's the most common kind of mistaken thinking, right? Okay. Now, if you go down Main Street and you ask somebody on Main Street who's never studied philosophy, are we more sure in our confused knowledge when we're confused or when we're clear and distinct and precise? What are they going to say? You're clear and distinct and precise, right? Okay? So they may be possibly, thinking of confused in the bad sense, right? Okay? And now come back to these fundamental arguments. You can see that Aristotle's argument is much stronger. Because Aristotle's argument is a what? A syllogism in the first figure there, right? Okay? Descartes' argument, as far as he has it, is at best a what? A third figure entity. And Aristotle takes up the third figure entity and he says, Socrates is just, Socrates is a philosopher, philosophers therefore are just, right? Berquist is Swedish, Berquist is a philosopher, therefore philosophers are Swedish, right? It's not a very strong argument, the third figure, what? Entity, right? Okay. But notice, even in mathematics, although it's more certain than the sciences, am I more sure, for example, that 28 is a number or that 28 is a perfect number? Number, yeah. So even there, I'm more sure they're confused, huh? But stop and think, see? I used to say to my students, they say, how old am I? When they're kind of say, I'm over 20? They say, yeah, you're over 20. They're sure about that. I'm over 30, right? We expect to go through the decades, right? But the more precise we get, the less what? Certain they are, right? If I'm drinking that glass of dry red wine, right? I'm more sure that it's dry red wine than that it's what? Cabernet, right? And more sure that it's what? Cabernet, maybe, than that it's what? From Napa Valley, right? Okay. Now, take a simple example. Usually I'm in a classroom, right, using the board here. Which is longer, the horizontal here or the vertical side? You not sure about that? Okay. Now, let's be more precise. How much longer is the board on top than the one on the side here?
Third one.
Huh?
A third.
You're sure about that, though, are you? See? How many inches longer is that one on top? Look. See? You're more sure that it's longer than that it's a foot and 1 inch longer or something, right? Okay. Now, somebody said, let's be scientific, let's get a ruler out, right? Okay. So we get out and we measure that, and we measure this, right? Okay. And we find out this 1 foot, 1 inch longer, let's say the one on top, right? Okay. Now, maybe if two of us measured the same thing, we wouldn't get the same thing. I might get 1 foot, 2 inches, right? Okay? Or 1 foot, 1.5 inches or something, right? People, in fact, do not necessarily get the same. If they measure the same thing, right? Okay? So, are you more sure that it's 1 foot, 1 inch longer after you measure than that it's longer? No, as a matter of fact, your ruler only goes down to a certain what? Size, right? And maybe it's actually 1 foot, 1 inch, and 1/100th of an inch.
Yeah.
Right? It could be, right? In which case, this is strictly speaking incorrect, isn't it? It's not 1 foot, 1 inch longer. It's 1 foot, 1 inch, and 1/100th of an inch. Or 1/1000th of an inch, 1/1,000,000th of an inch, right? Right? Or it's short 1 inch by 1/1,000,000th of an inch, right? Is it? So you're still not more sure that it's what? 1 foot, 1 inch longer than it's longer. Right? Is it? The same with an example there. I say, what do I weigh, right? So you weigh more than 100 pounds, you say? Okay. Weigh more than 300 pounds? No. But now if you start to narrow this down, right, are you going to become more sure or less sure? Less sure, aren't you? Right? Okay. I say, let's be scientific. Let's put you on a weighing machine, right? Maybe one weighing machine might say I weigh 195. Another machine say I weigh 196. Right? So which is more sure? Did I weigh 195 or did I weigh between 190 and 200? Which is more sure?
Between measures.
See, 195 might be incorrect. It might be 196. It might be 195 and a fourth, right? Of a pound, right? Do you see that? See? We're not sure of the precise, huh? Even when you use these instruments, right? How old am I, right? They always get the wrong age for me. I took everything else. Okay? But I say now, suppose someone says, let's be scientific. Let's go and get the birth certificate, right? But aren't there mistakes made sometimes in birth certificates? Huh? The guy had something to drink or he was distracted, right? Huh? I know when my father died, there was 2 dates for his birth. 2 years, right? Some of the documents, right? And I don't know, it has to do with insurance. I don't know how old he was. But I mean, there were 2 extra dates, right? Well, you want to go into 1892 and that was 1893 or something, you know? And so, but, you know. So are you more sure he was born in 1892 or he was born in the last century, you know, last decade of the last century, right? I'm more sure of that, right? See? They make mistakes, right? People sometimes falsify records too, right? For one reason or another, right? So the more precise you get, the less what? Certain you are. Huh? So Descartes made a very fundamental mistake here. And this identification of certitude with clarity and distinction gives you, for one mistake, 2 other kinds of mistakes that follow from that. Huh? See, sometimes when he's very sure about something, he thinks he knows it clearly and distinctly, because certitude and clarity and distinction go along. Other times, because something is very clear and distinct, it must be so. Okay? So in Descartes, for example, when he talks about the soul, or he talks about thought, everybody knows Descartes' famous thing there, I think, therefore I am, right? Okay. Which, that's been used against academics before anyway, but he's very sure he's thinking, right? And therefore he must know clearly and distinctly what thinking is. Does that follow? Okay. I'm very sure I'm alive. Does that mean that therefore I know clearly and distinctly what life is? It doesn't. So Descartes makes that kind of mistake, right? He doesn't want to define motion because he knows clearly and distinctly what motion is. Why? He's so sure about motion, right? Shakespeare said, things in motion sooner catch the eye than what not stir. Everybody knows what motion is, right? Yeah. But the fact that you're sure about it is not a sign that it's what? Known clearly and distinctly. Unless those two go together, right? But they don't. It's reverse. But vice versa, when he gets into his mathematical picture of the world, things are so clear and distinct, they must be what? Must be true. Surely something so clear and distinct must be true. See? So in making that fundamental mistake of identifying certitude for us with clarity and distinction, he can make two kinds of mistakes from that. Where he's sure about something or certain about it, he thinks he must therefore know it clearly and distinctly. And vice versa, where he's clear and distinct in something, it must surely be so. Two kinds of mistakes from one, huh? But I think to some extent, this thinking of Descartes kind of dominates the modern world for a lot of reasons, huh? And it's very important when you talk about general and particular knowledge, because particular knowledge is more distinct than general knowledge, right? If it were also more certain, then you could forget about general knowledge, couldn't you? But if the general is more confused and therefore more certain, you don't replace the more certain with the less certain, do you? So if I know I'm drinking Cabernet Sauvignon, I don't cease to know by that fact that I'm drinking dry red wine, right? And in fact, I'm more sure I'm drinking dry red wine than Cabernet Sauvignon. Okay? But if the more precise was more certain, then the particular would simply replace the general. So moderns have a kind of a tendency to jump into the particular all at once, neglecting the general, right? Now, if the particular was not only more distinct, but also more certain, then they'd have their cake and eat it, right? As a matter of fact, they're not the same. Now, it's not really until the dawn of the 20th century that some of the physicists and then those who partook of the great developments in quantum theory and relativity theory, that they began to return to Aristotle's position. But I think without thinking of Aristotle, right, on their own. Huh? And what I've attached here is first a couple of passages from Pierre Duhem, right? Now, Pierre Duhem actually wrote the aim and structure of physical theory around the turn of the century. I think 1903 was it. But this particular edition, which I have in my office, 50 years later, it's still being reprinted, right? Kind of a classic work in the philosophy of science. Huh? And you can see it's got Princeton University Press there. But more than Princeton University Press, the preface to it, to this edition, is by none other than the father of wave mechanics, Louis de Broglie, the greatest French physicist of the 20th century, right? The father of wave mechanics. And in his description of Duane, Duane was first of all a physicist, right? He was working mainly in thermodynamics, and he contributions to that part of physics. But secondly, he's very famous as an historian of science. And then on the basis of his experience in physics and his knowledge of the history of science, he wrote something on the nature of physical theory. Okay? But he sees the point that Aristotle's made. He makes no reference to Aristotle. He sees it from his own experience, right? And notice what he says here in this first passage. The initiated believe That should be uninitiated, I think. There's a mistake there. The uninitiated believe that the result of a scientific experiment is distinguished from ordinary observation by a higher degree of certainty. They are mistaken. For the account of an experiment in physics does not have the immediate certainty relatively easy to check that ordinary non-scientific testimony has. Though less certain than the latter, physical experiment is ahead of it in the number and precision of the details it causes us to know. Therein lies its true and essential superiority. See? In its precision, but not in its what? Certitude, huh? Ordinary testimony, which reports a fact established by the procedures of common sense and not by scientific methods, can be certain only at the expense of not being detailed or minute. With rare exceptions, ordinary testimony offers assurance only to the extent it is less precise, less analytic, and sticks to the grossest and most obvious considerations. Quite different is the account of a physical experiment. It is not content with letting us know a gross phenomena. Okay? Finding the last paragraph there. Therefore, a theoretical interpretation removes from the results of physical experiment the immediate certainty, right, that the data of ordinary observation possess. On the other hand, this theoretical interpretation which permits scientific experiment to penetrate much further than common sense into the detailed analysis of phenomena, and to give a description of them whose precision exceeds by far the accuracy of current language. So notice the contrast he's making there between an ordinary observation as being more certain and the scientific one as being more precise. Huh? That's just the opposite of what Descartes was saying, and what Aristotle was saying. Now, the same way he talks here about the laws and so on. He goes through describing that, right? He talks about how the laws of physics are provisional and so on. But look at the bottom of page 2 in particular. The problem of the validity of the laws of physics hence poses itself in an entirely different manner, infinitely more complicated and delicate than the problems of the laws of common sense. A law of physics possesses a certainty much less immediate and much more difficult to estimate than a law of common sense. But it surpasses the latter by the minute and detailed precision of its predictions. Again, that contrast, right? The laws of physics can acquire this minuteness of detail only by sacrificing something of the fixed and absolute certainty of common sense laws. See, precision doesn't go together with that. Now, he takes the example of balance here, right? And I think this is a marvelous image he has during running for this thinking here. There is a sort of balance between precision and certainty. One cannot be increased except to the detriment of the other. He's thinking of a balance at the end of physics, right? And when you have precision, or distinction, and then certitude over here. As one goes up, the other goes down, right? What are you thinking, Mr. Berquist? A liquid. You get more precise? Yeah, it's a red liquid, right? It's a wine, yeah. Okay, what kind of wine, right? As I start to get more and more precise, I get less and less what? Sure, right? See? I say to the students, how old am I? You're over 20. Sure about that? Yeah. Over 30? Yeah. Over 40? Yeah. Over 50? Yeah. Over 60? I'm not sure I'm over 60. See? And as I get them to be more and more precise, the less what? Sure they are, right? You see? See that? How much do I weigh? You try to narrow it down, right? The more precise you try to state my weight, you say I'm between 100 and 300 pounds, pretty sure about that, right? Okay, maybe between 150 and 250, okay, pretty sure about that, right? Then you get down to the decade of my poundage, you're a little more sure about that than am I exactly 196 or 197 or 193 or something, right? Do you see that? So it's kind of a balance there, right? As one goes up, the other goes down. So we have you can't be cake and eat it, you might say here, right? We want both what? Certitude and precision. But the more we have of one, the less we have of the other. That's kind of the defect of man's knowledge, right? But he sees that very clearly, right? And Aristotle saw it very clearly. And Pierre Duane is the first, major name, especially in the history of science and so on, who sees this very clearly. But as I say, the original edition goes back to the turn of the century, so it's really before the developments in the physics of the 20th century. Okay. Now, the rest of the selections are from physicists who took part in the changes that took place in the 20th century. And Louis de Broglie was talking about how some of the physicists in thermodynamics didn't want to go beyond this because of the incertitude of being more precise. Huh? Okay. Look at the third paragraph there on that first reading. Precisely because thermodynamics pictures only bulk occurrences, without wishing to enter into the details of the elementary processes, it does not run the risk of the errors which necessarily affect the more audacious theories that pretend to enter into description of these processes. So a great number of physicists were of the opinion 40 years ago that it was preferable to be satisfied with these thermodynamic propositions, without making the appeal to more precise but more hazardous conceptions, right? See? But they're more precise but also more hazardous, they're less what? Certain, yeah. Okay. Now, he goes on to say in the next paragraph, of course, that our mind wants to go on to that more precise thing, right? I want to know if I'm drinking Cabernet or Pinot Noir when I'm drinking, right? But I'm not going to be less sure when I try to be particular, right? The more particular or precise I try to be, the less sure I'll be, right? It doesn't stop if I'm trying to recognize the kind of grape I'm drinking and so on, where it came from. But I have to realize I'm going to be more hazardous in my answers here, right? Do you see that? So he sees that, right? Now, in the second selection, Louis de Broglie, he realizes, and this is something that everybody who's spoken about these things, the great scientists, Einstein, Niels Bohr, Heisenberg, and so on, they all realize that in modern physics, the precision comes from something they call idealization. And because idealization, as Heisenberg will explain, involves a departure from reality. I'll give you a very simple example of that. Einstein, the evolution of physics, right? Says you got a card out here, right? Okay? And you give it a push, right? And it rolls for a while and then it stops. Okay? Then you get out, they say you oil the wheels here, right? Okay? Give it the same push and it rolls even further before it stops, huh? Then you get out and you make the road as smooth as you can, right? AC smooth, right? Classy. You give it a little more oil and so on, you give it the same push, it goes even further without stopping, right? Now he says, you go into your imagination. Suppose we could eliminate all of that friction in the wheels, right? And in the road and so on. Then you give it that same push, and what happened? It'd go forever. But Einstein says there's not one example of a body in the absence of external forces. See? I blend into imagination. See? I made this more precise, right? That more smooth that road than it really is ever going to be in reality, right? Okay? And I imagine what would happen. But I'm imagining now. I'm departing from reality. See? Well, Heisenberg realized this. Louis de Broglie realized this. Louis de Broglie is the father of wave mechanics. Heisenberg, they're quantum mechanics, right? Okay? And that's what Louis de Broglie says in this book, We also could examine whether all idealizations are not that much less applicable to reality when they become more complete. Now, though we have little inclination to be paradoxical, we could hold, contrary to Descartes, that nothing is more misleading than a clear and distinct idea. You see how far he's moved there, right? And Louis de Broglie, of course, is a Frenchman, right? He's the greatest French physicist of the 20th century, And he's talking about his French compatriot, Descartes in several centuries. Isn't that strong, what he's saying there. Okay. Now, Heisenberg is the father of quantum mechanics, Heisenberg, of course, is responsible for many things in modern physics. He's the first man to say that the nucleus of the atom is composed of protons and neutrons, right? In 1932, after the discovery of the neutron, right? He figured out that's what was the nucleus. But then he formulated quantum mechanics, and he actually formulated the greatest change in physics since Newton, the principle of indeterminism. We'll talk about that later on in the course. Notice what he's saying. These are really based on his gift for lectures. They published under the title of Physics and Philosophy, but it says a gift for lectures basically gave its copy. Furthermore, one of the most important features of the development and analysis of modern physics, and by modern physics he means the physics of the 20th century, is the experience that the concepts of natural language, vaguely defined as they are, seem to be more stable in the expansion of knowledge than the precise terms of scientific language. So he's saying that the vague is more what? Stable, which means more certain, right? Thomas will often say in Latin, stabiliora certiora, more stable and certain, right? Than the precise terms of scientific language. And he's hinting at the reason there. Derived as an idealization of only limited groups of phenomena. Now, it gives a reason that's peculiar to science because of the idealization that Louis Du Bois spoke of. This is in fact not surprising, since the concepts of natural language, ordinary speech, are formed by the immediate connection with reality. They represent reality. On the other hand, the scientific concepts are idealizations. They are derived from experience obtained by refined experimental tools and are precisely defined through axioms and definitions. Only through these precise definitions is it possible to connect the concepts with a mathematical scheme and to derive mathematically the infinite variety of possible phenomena in this field. But through this process of idealization and precise definition, the immediate connection with reality is lost. And therefore you lose certitude, right? Okay. Now, in the bottom of this page, Heisenberg sees that, this is important for talking about God, too, later on. Keeping in mind the intrinsic stability of the concepts of natural language in the process of scientific development, one sees that after the experience of modern physics, our attitude towards concepts like mind or the human soul or life or God will be different from that of the 19th century, because these concepts belong to the natural language and have therefore immediate connection with reality. The general trend of human thinking in the 19th century had been toward an increasing confidence in the scientific method and in precise rational terms, and it led to a general skepticism with regard to those concepts of natural language which do not fit into the closed frame of scientific thought. Modern physics has in many ways increased the skepticism, but it has at the same time turned it against the overestimation of precise scientific concepts. The skepticism against precise scientific concepts does not mean that there should be a definite limitation for the application of rational thinking. On the contrary, one may say that the human ability to understand may be in a certain sense unlimited. When you look at the fragment of Anaxagoras of the mind, that's the first thing he says about the mind, it's unlimited. Talk about that, huh? Whenever we proceed from the known to the unknown, we may hope to understand, but we may have to learn at the same time the meaning of the word understanding. Okay? We'll come back to that when we look at the second page in our reading here, Now the third one is taken from Bertie Russell, whom I don't often have nice things to say about, but notice what he says here about his own philosophical method. This is concerned with my method. My method invariably is to start from something vague but puzzling, something which seems indubitable, but which I cannot explicitly precision. Okay. He seems to see somewhat there that he has what? Something certain, right? But not very what? Precise, right? A little bit of what Aristotle. So there are some thinkers, I think, mainly the great scientists of the 20th century, who from their experience of physics have come back to Aristotle's understanding that the fused is more certain, right? Than the distinct, huh? But You might think that because he's going to consider things in general here, before in particular, he's going to remain confused. Right? But if you look at the different kinds of examples he has, there's really two movements from the confused to distinct. And one you might call on a horizontal level, on the same level of universality, and the other the vertical when you descend to the particular. Let me give you an example of what I mean. When I go from triangle to equilateral triangle, isosceles triangle, scaling triangle, I'm going from the general to the particular, and therefore from the confused to the distinct, right? Okay? When I go from triangle to the definition of triangle, something like a plane figure contained by three straight lines. I'm moving from the confused to the distinct too, from the name to the definition, right? But I'm staying on the same level of universality, aren't I? Because every triangle is a plane figure contained by three straight lines, and vice versa, every plane figure contained by three straight lines is a triangle, right? When I go from triangle to equilateral, isosceles, scaling. Okay? When I go from quadrilateral, let's say, to the definition of quadrilateral, there's a plane figure contained by four straight lines, right? I'm on the same level of universality, right? When I descend into the square and the oblong and the rhombus and the rhomboid and the trapezium, right? I'm descending from the general to the particular, right? Okay? So you have two movements from the confused to the distinct here, right? One on the horizontal level, staying on the same level of universality. And they talked about going from the whole to its parts, right? A composed whole to its parts, you're staying on the same level of universality. When you go from the universal whole to its parts, you're descending, right? Now, which of those movements should you go through first? Should I move from the confused to the distinct, going from the general to particular first, or should I go from the confused to the distinct, staying on the same level of universality first?
Same level of universality.
Yeah. Why? Why should I do that first?
You're still on the gen.
Huh?
You're still on the gen.
Yeah.
So you know what you're dividing.
Yeah. In other words, if I don't know distinctly what a triangle is, I cannot understand the basis for this distinction here, right? Mm-hmm. Because in equilateral triangle, those three lines, those three straight lines are all equal. In the isosceles, two of them are equal. In the scaling, none of them are equal, right? So unless I knew distinctly that you have a plane figure contained by three straight lines, I couldn't understand the very basis of this division. You see that? Okay. You have to understand the genus, right? Okay. Take another example here, the same thing. Huh? Let's talk about the most famous literary poetic form. Let's talk about the sonnet, right? The sonnet is divided, as you know, into the Italian sonnet and the English sonnet. Huh? And sometimes they name them from the greatest practitioner, the Petrarchian sonnet and the Shakespearean sonnet, right? Okay. Now, there you're going from the general to the particular, right? Okay. So now, if you define the sonnet in general, you'd say it's a poem in 14 lines, right? Okay. But there's two forms, or two species, right? Of the sonnet, the Italian sonnet and the English sonnet. Okay? So should you move from sonnet to Italian and English sonnet first? Or should you move from sonnet to a poem in 14 lines first? Yeah. And then you can understand better the distinction between these two. Because in the English sonnet, the 14 lines fall into what? 3 quatrains, and then a what? couplet that completes it, right? In the Italian sonnet, you have an octet of 8 lines, right? Answered by a sextet of 6 lines, huh? Okay? But if you don't understand that a sonnet has 14 lines always, you wouldn't understand the basis for that division, right? Okay, do you see that? Okay. You're talking about the syllogism, right? So you go from syllogism to demonstration and dialectical syllogism. Or should go to syllogism, the definition of syllogism. Definition of syllogism, right? Mm-hmm. And then you see that in any syllogism there are at least 2 statements laid down, right? Which no one follows necessarily, right? But then in the demonstration, the 2 ones are seen to be necessarily true, right? In the dialectical one, they're seen only as being what? Probable one. Okay? So Aristotle, in the 8 books of natural hearing, is going to be moving from the confused to the distinct, but on the what? Level of the general, right? Mm-hmm. And then he will descend to the particular in the book on the universe, in the book on generation and corruption, the book on the soul, and the other books on living things. So in a sense, what the moderns do is they jump from the general to the particular without going through that first movement of becoming distinct on the general.
Could you give some examples?
Well, I mean, when they study natural things, that's where they begin. With chemistry or physics or biology, right? You're already talking about a particular kind of change, huh? As we'll see, natural philosophy is mainly about change, right? So Aristotle's going to be talking about what's involved in change in general, and then we're going to talk about change of place in particular, right? Okay? Change of quality, growth, and so on. But the moderns will jump right down and talk about change of place right away, first. They are satisfied with the confused knowledge of what they're studying in general, right? And they descend to a particular kind. Okay? I mean, it might do it to some extent because it knows in a confused way what the general is, right? But maybe you should have a distinct knowledge of the general before you try to descend to the particular, right? So they go from a confused knowledge of the general, trying to get a distinct knowledge of the particular. Some more thoughtful ones come back to general later on. You know? If you read Heisenberg's books, right, he'll often have a chapter in the early Greeks, right? He'll often, discuss Plato or Aristotle, right? But they need to go back to this to see, in perspective, what he's talked about as a young man in a very particular way, right? Now, to some extent, too, they can do this because they're studying the natural world mathematically, right? So they don't have to talk about what these things are. The mathematics has to work, right? But then they end up by saying the mathematics is wiser than we are. That's what Heisenberg says, and Max Bohr and other people. We didn't know what it meant. Okay? You notice that all the way through the modern mind that, people talk about, metaphor and figures of speech. What is the figure of speech in general? What does it mean to speak figuratively? In general. They can't tell you. See? Ask my colleagues, what is reasoning? They can't tell me. really define it, right? They don't have a distinct knowledge of what is general to what they're talking about in particular. Now, sometimes I hear them say, well, if we stop to get a distinct knowledge of the general, never get to the particular. Maybe some truth to that, right? It takes a long time for the mind to. But Aristotle did descend to the particular after he got through getting distinct knowledge of general.
And Chesterton said about, people say it's fiddling while Rome burns, and he says, well, if somebody wasn't fiddling while Rome burns, we would have never had the theory of hydraulics and everything would have been fire truck.
So with this, I call these kind of secondary readings. We do examine the students on them, but you don't stop and realize, right? The point of what Aristotle is seeing here, right? And then you see that Descartes is denying that, right? You realize what a basic mistake that is. It's a grand mistake, a great mistake, right? But a mistake about something that's the beginning, as fundamental as this, right, is going to further you go, the more you'll be off. So they say he gets two kinds of mistakes, and one basic mistake. You read Descartes, and he says, I think, therefore I am. I'm sure I'm thinking, therefore I know exactly what thought is. It doesn't follow at all. You see? And he's sure there's a God, so he has a clear and distinct idea of God, right? And Thomas is famous for being in class, always saying, what is God? He was sure there was a God, but he wanted to know more distinctly, and so far as we can, what is God, right? What is the incarnation, right? Professor Berquist remark about the way Fra Angelico, was a Africanization, I guess, but he represented the various saints there, when facing the cross, right? And most of them are, various devotion and sorrow and everything, Counselors are trying to figure out what does this mean, why is God dying for us and so on, See, and some too, right? Cruor Deus homo. Why is God a man? Why did God become a man, right? So you're trying to understand these things, right? Okay. So you can be very sure about something without what? Knowing exactly what it is, right? But vice versa, and then when something is clear and distinct, you've got a picture that you can see that everything is clear and fits together, then you think it must be what? True, right? And you find this in the moderns sometimes, like Descartes and others, that they'll have something very clear, and then they'll say, well, it must be true, right? Sometimes I'm explaining a little bit what this idealization means. I use a little analogy. Suppose you go down to the theater this Friday, and King Lear is playing by Shakespeare, right? Okay? And you come home and someone says, now, what does Shakespeare tell you about life? Well, life is tragic. That's what you learn. Next Friday goes down to the theater and the Merry Wives of Windsor, right? The Comedy of Errors is played by Shakespeare, right? And what does Shakespeare tell us about life? It's a comedy, right? Okay? Well, is life a tragedy or is it a comedy?
It's a mixture.
Yeah, it's tragedy is what? More precise than life really is. And comedy is more precise than life really is. It's something a little more indeterminate, right? See? So in a way, tragedy is in a way an idealization of one aspect of life, right? Bringing that aspect of life into such sharp focus, right? Okay? By comedy is an idealization of life, but bringing into focus another aspect of life, huh? But the more you try to say life is that's exactly what life is, a tragedy. Or Or that's exactly what life is, a comedy. The more you seem to be departing from the reality, right? And you have some limitation in saying this, right? So, but if you say it's both a tragedy and a comedy, you seem to be like a contradiction, right? But no, there's a precision there in tragedy and comedy that there isn't in these other kinds of fiction, right? Where it's like a little more ambiguous, huh? See? It's not so clear what life is. But probably something of both, right? Huh? The people who've been in the Army and the Navy or something, they can tell you horrible stories, but they can tell you some very, very funny ones, right? My cousin was in the Navy, and this one guy, he wasn't getting good reception on his radio. So he went out and he picked where the ship line was, and he drilled a hole inside the ship so he could stick his thing out. Well, the ship had not been loaded fully yet, so went down. Where he thought it was above the water level was actually under it. Can you imagine? There's all kinds of funny things happen like this, and he came back, Costa Rica had been in the Navy too. And so every time I told one of these funny stories, Costa Rica would top with another story, even funnier, what happened to him in the Navy, see? So, I mean, what war is, it's kind of a, comedy, right? It's something, comical about it, right? But obviously another aspect, and you can, emphasize one rather than the other, but you're not, you seem to be kind of, departing a bit from reality when you make it just a tragedy or just a comedy, huh? It's both, huh? And you also mentioned in the midst of something that bothers us, we sometimes see a funny side of it, we start laughing, Which is it, It's not exactly one or the other, right? There's something. So even our French couple Sunday strike us as funny sometimes. You almost kind of you want to be serious about what's happening to them, But but it gives you no idea what you mean by idealization there, right? We see the laws of Boyle fit the idealized gas right now, the real gas. But idealization is necessary for the precision. That's kind of a special reason to what you're doing in science, right? Why the precision doesn't have what? Certitude, right? Because the precision is by an idealization, and that's something imagination. You smooth things out more than they really are.
There's something that behind Greece that's another theory that I forget his name, that wrote that book on Darwin's black box.
Michael Behe.
That he said that's what so many of the biologists just have an imaginary. They can picture how easy these changes are from one species to another. Because there's only a few little changes. They can picture it real easy. But they don't understand the complicated mechanics of the biochemistry. It's immense complexity.
Heisenberg, we'll come back to it and look at the second page here, but Heisenberg was talking about something very interesting, I think, and kind of a sign at the bottom of page 4 again. Keeping in mind the intrinsic stability of the concepts of natural language in the process of scientific development. One thinks about in physics, attitude towards concepts like mind or the human soul or life or God would be different, right? From that of the 9th century, huh? But as part of this is, now when you study God, and we'll come back to this next time, but when you study God, you often know him by the via negativa, right? By way of negation. God is the unmoved mover, right? God is simple. God is not composed, right? He's unchanging, huh? Now, when you know something negatively, is it better if you can negate the general or the particular? Let's take a simple example, right? If I'm knowing the number 7, let's say, if I know the number 7 affirmatively, say it's a number, am I as close to 7 as when I say it's an odd number? Or if I say it's a prime odd number, the more particular I get, the closer I get to 7, right? Okay. Number separates 7 from everything that is not a number, right? But it could be an even number for all we know, right? Odd number starts narrowed down, right? Prime odd number, even more so, right? Huh? But suppose I was knowing 7 negatively, right? It's not 4. It's not even. Which is closer to 7? Not 4 or not even?
Not even.
Yeah. Not 4 separates 7 from 4, but not from anything else, right? Not even separates 7 from 2, 4, 6, 8, and all the other even numbers, right? So notice the difference here, right? I'm getting closer to 7 when I negate the general. I'm getting closer to 7 when I can affirm the particular. Okay? So we're closer to God, for example, we say that God does not walk. God does not grow. Or we say God is unchanging. Just closer to God. Unchanging, yeah. Which is closer to God. To say God doesn't have 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen. Or God has no parts.
No.
Yeah. So we can negate the general. We're closer to God if we know Him by way of negation. That's the way we know Him in theology. It's in the vivid vision that we know Him as He is, huh? Now you can't understand negation if you don't know what you're negating. So which is more useful in theology? To know what a whole and parts are, or to know that an atom, a molecule of water is H2O? It's more important. Yeah. You're not going to bother to say that God doesn't have 2 atoms of hydrogen and oxygen, right? Or C6H12O6, whatever it is. He doesn't have 6 of these and 12 of those and 6 of those, right? No, we're going to say he has no parts. I'm going to give a reason why he has no parts, right? Okay. So a knowledge of the general is more useful in theology, for the most part, than a knowledge of the particular. See? It's useless in theology, really, to know that body is H2O. Okay. But it's very useful in theology to know what whole and parts are. It's more useful in theology to know what change is than to know what chemical changes of some particular kind, right? Because you're going to be negating change in general of God, right? But if those general things were replaced by the particular, then you'd have no way of knowing God in theology. Huh? But if the general is more certain, more sure, then you have what? Things you can use in knowing God. Now, why do the moderns jump into particular so soon? Well, part of it is for practical reasons, right? We saw back in Aristotle's premium to wisdom that knowledge of the particular is closer to action, right, than knowledge of the general. Okay. But theology is not primarily. Theology is primarily about God, and He's unchanging. Can't make anything of God. Can't do anything to God. You don't want to. But you can understand some things about God, right? But in this life, we have to understand the creatures, and therefore it always involves some kind of negation, right? But we know it better when we can negate the general than the particular. Well, we can't really negate the general without understanding it distinctly. And the mind just, to say they jump from the general right down to the particular. So they never know the general distinctly. And therefore they can't understand distinctly the negations they're making. And why are you making these negations? So there are a lot of consequences for theology for not knowing these things, right?
Yeah.
But even you'll find the Greek physicists, they want to go back to the Greeks, and this is in Heisenberg especially, because they want to see in some perspective, right, the particular thing that they did, right, as a younger man. And so in some sense, if you read, I have a whole bunch of, Heisenberg books in my office, but as you go and read them from the earliest things to the later ones, right, he sees more and more clearly what he accomplishes as a young man, the older he gets, right? Because he sees it more in this, in terms of something more general, right? So, got to one page. That's pretty good, huh? Okay. Now, when you study this next page in common and private experience, I often tell the students when I teach this, we're taking up these things, primarily for natural philosophy, but you'll find these things extremely useful for understanding all kinds of other things. So the distinction I make of the next page between common and private experience, that's very important to understand what we mean by the philosophy of nature, but it's very important for understanding experimental science. It's very important for theology. You see the passage there from Paul VI, huh? So, we'll stop today, huh? 10 minutes to 5, huh? Okay. Yeah. And we'll start with the second page. But now, what is the connection between the first page and the second page?
Common is more known.
Yeah, you might expect that a knowledge based on common experience is more general than a knowledge based on private experience, right? Okay. So if the general, or a knowledge of the general is before a knowledge of the particular, right? Then a knowledge based on common experience, or which common experience is sufficient experience, right? Mm-hmm. Is before a knowledge based on what? Private experience, huh? Yeah. Okay. But the distinction between general and particular is more general. The distinction between knowledge based on common experience and private experience. In fact, I'll give you an objection. I'll see if we can solve this, okay? Aristotle agrees that the basic road is from the senses into reason, right? Okay? The basic road is from the senses into reason. Aristotle talks about mechanics. But the senses know what? Particulars, right? You don't see man in general, you see a particular man, like this man or this man, right? Mm-hmm. Okay? And reason knows the general, right? So, if the senses come before reason, then the particular is before the general. So Aristotle contradicts himself, right? Right? So I've now overthrown Aristotle, right? You see how great I am? That's what the sophist does, right? He tries to, refute the greatest mind around he can find, and if he does so, he's above that mind, right? And therefore he should be honored and admired for his apparent wisdom. Now, I get the students in class, right, sometimes, huh? And, Aristotle's contradicted himself, yeah. There's a contradiction between his saying that the senses come before reason, right? And what he's saying in this chapter here. What?
Different senses before?
No. That apparently contradicts what he says here, general before the particular, right? Here he says particular before the general. Aristotle, so I can find it in my text in Aristotle, he says the particular before the general. Because he starts by senses, right? So how can you say here the general is before the particular? Okay, it's all mixed up, right?
The particular generality and the general particularity is what it is.
It's how easy it was going to be deceived, huh? By the fallacy of equivocation, huh? Everybody thinks it's just, they all think he's contradicting himself. Well, notice, they can't distinguish the two senses of particular. Here the word particular means what? It means a singular, an individual, nothing universal at all. Okay? It means a singular individual. And general here means what? Universal. Common to many, right? But now, when you say, in the reading we just had, that the general is before the particular, particular means the less universal. Okay? And general means the what? More universal. Okay? Now notice, we do this in both ways. We can say Socrates is a particular man, right? Meaning an individual man, right? We could also say that the dog is a particular kind of animal. But a dog is nevertheless not a singular. It's something universal instead of many, right? Okay? You see that? So, what we're saying is that singulars, right? Singulars come before any universals, just as the what? Senses come before reason, huh? But among universals, the more universal comes before the what? Less universal. Okay? Now, equivocation comes in because we call this particular, right? And we call this particular, right? Okay? And we call this general, and we call all this general. Right? Okay? So Aristotle says we go from the general to particular, he means from the more universal to the less universal. But when he says we go from the particulars to the general, he means from singulars to universal. You see that? Okay? Now, the sophist, of course, he comes back with his second objection now, right? Okay? Okay, you got it that way, he says. But, which is closer to the singulars? The more universal or the less universal? Which is closer?
Less universal.
Yeah. So if you start with the singular, wouldn't you come to the less universal next, not the more universal? See? But notice, he's forgetting the fact that we know things in a confused way before distinctly. So when we begin to know the universal, right, we know it in a confused way first, and therefore in a more general way than particular. Now, I usually show that with two simple examples, huh? I say, suppose you're going to classify the vegetation on campus, right? All the plant life, right? Not taking anybody's word for it. Well, all your knowledge would start with your senses, right? The individual trees and bushes and grass and so on that you saw, right? So singulars would come before any universals, right? But now among universals, would you first see the difference between two kinds of grass, or two kinds of bushes, or two kinds of trees? Or would you see the difference between grass and tree?
Grass and tree.
Yeah, see? You'd see the more universal before the what? Less universal, right? Okay? And another reason for that is that the difference between two kinds of grass is not as great as between the tree and the grass, right? So you're more apt to see the difference between the tree and the grass than between different kinds of grass, right? Mm-hmm. When I get a grass seed, they have the composition of different kinds of grass. I don't know what the hell he's talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Okay? But even with trees, right? When I was in college one time, we had gone in botany class there and classify the trees, right? We got a little chart in there and identify the trees. Well, the broadleaf and the needle tree, never confuse those two, but the Norway pine and the other kind of pines, I still don't know the difference between them. You see? But the broader differences I know, right? Another example was we're going to classify alcoholic beverages. This is a popular example, right? But take nobody's word for it, right? Well, all your knowledge should start with individual glasses of beer and wine and whiskey and so on, right? Okay. So singulars would come before any universals, right? Okay. But now, when universals, would you recognize the difference between, let's say, Budweiser and Miller beer first, or between beer and wine? Yeah. See? Or beer and whiskey, right? Huh? You see? And then between Scotch and rye whiskey and all the rest of them, right? You see? So although singular glasses would come before any other ones, you first recognize the difference between beer and wine before Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir. You see what I mean? That's because you know things are confused way before distinctly. You see how easy it is to be deceived, though? See? So it's nice in the very first reading here to be able to get a systematic argument from mixing up two senses of the word particular and two senses of the word general, right? And teach everybody in class, right? You know, it's not a lot of fun, you know? But you got to solve it, and otherwise they'll go away thinking Aristotle's pretty refuted, right? I remember one time I was teaching Hegel, you know, and it's funny about showing how Hegel's method is much superior to Aristotle's syllogism, right? And I thought it was a big joke, you know. I went out to class and this guy was coming on and said, gee, there was some lecture today, he said, you know, finding someone who's improved in Aristotle. So I gotta go back in there and take these guys out. I think you're taking it seriously, you know. So but Marx, you get to go there and tell them about anything, you know, and they believe it, you know. But you know, they have a hard time. They can't separate those different names in particular. That's not the most difficult example of a biblical word, right? Huh? Takes a while. Okay. The knowledge of reason is a knowledge of reason. What are two senses of knowledge of reason? The knowledge of reason is a knowledge of reason. Two different meanings of knowledge of reason. The knowledge of reason is a knowledge of reason.
About reason.
What?
The knowledge about reason.
Is a knowledge of reason that belongs to reason, right? But it's not the only knowledge of reason, right? The knowledge of reason is not the knowledge of reason, right? It's also the knowledge of triangles, the knowledge of God, it's the knowledge of the other things, right?
Theology, Brandon Brown says we should start by saying what the church, just because the church says there's no errors in Scripture, but there are no errors, he says we should just start by trying to find errors. And if we find errors, then we know it's wrong. And he found some. But then his examples, are doubtful.
Yeah.
If he's more certain that he's found errors than the church is right about it.
Yeah.
It's something like that. You're more certain of the theology of what the church says than.
Well, one time, they invited me down to BC there, you know, they gave a lecture. He was denying the existence of God because of evil, right? The Holocaust and so on, right? So, I said in the discussion for that, it seems to me that you're basing yourself upon this statement, I said. If you don't see a reason why God would allow these evils, right, then there's no reason why God could have allowed these evils. But you don't want to admit that, right? It's making yourself up, right? You know, you know, why did God allow the Holocaust, right? And he didn't see a reason why God would allow the Holocaust, right? Therefore, there's no reason why God. So, I mean, you know, you go back to human things, you see, and I give an example, you know, Berquist forced me to take Greek, right? You know? And I told you Greek, I did this, right? And it's Greek. Okay, so there are things that other men know the reason why, but I don't see the reason why I should do this, right? But they see the reason why I should do this, right?
and wait for it to orbit. God, given the infinite distance of our mind, right?
Yeah.
The reason why God will allow things could escape us, if even the reason why, some didn't see reasons why certain things should be done, some else didn't see why.
There's one example. They say Bobby Fischer, when he played chess, he could see like 60 moves ahead. And he would think, if he did that, but you wouldn't know why he's doing that because you couldn't see it. But it must seem like a dumb move. But
I used to be a pretty good checker, when I was a kid, and finally one of my his cousins came there, and she was a pretty good player. She beat me in checkers, right? But he said, sorry, everybody said I was pretty good, I lost too, though, Take me down to 32, But I mean, he's not actually a long time to win, but that might be good for the kid, right? To realize that he's not the real greatest checker player,
someone said that when the planes crashed in the towers, they said God must have been asleep. Because why would he?
You don't know. Why the innocent suffer and so on? But in a sense, I was thinking down. I was saying, you're saying that if you don't see reason why, then it's not a good reason why. You don't want to get that feeling. It's a little difficult in saying that, but I mean, to him, the Holocaust is so horrible that, it's piercing open, There couldn't be any reason why this would be allowed by any person.
And with the private and the common, one thing I've wondered about is sacred scripture. It seems to be using a lot of private experience. Because it's choosing the experience of one people and their, their experience. Can use private experience. It seems a number of things to understand them. You have to study.
But scripture, even in its metaphors, we'll use things like the Lord is my rock. Do something that's common to everybody. Sees some experience of a rock, right? The Lord is my shepherd, right? We experience these things.
But some of the metaphors, though, seem to be private.
Some of them we probably need more, help with, But for the most part, I mean, the things that they're taken from, with the high minds, the running water, puzzles about this parched earth, serving God. The Psalms of thirst, right? These are more common ones you have in Scripture. I'm not saying you don't have some need for private experience, I mean, but you did something different here, right? I mean, the prophet that says, God uses human intermediaries for us in Revelation, right? He doesn't reveal everything directly, immediately to everybody, right? He reveals something to Moses of the prophet, right? And the prophet to us, right?
Christ taught the apostles, and the apostles taught their successors, and down to the line, right? Tradition. When you come to define an article of the faith, then you use thoughts that are tied to see. Pope says there, right? If you had a chance to read that yet, but But he speaks of universal and necessary experience, right? So you're using thoughts that are tied to universal necessary experience to express the articles of faith, like God has no parts or whatever it is, or three persons of God, so that you don't have to change these as private experience grows, right? You have to be using
quarks or molecules talk about God, you know? Major particles and so on. Quantum jumps. Talk about God, right? So these, concepts in science change. They're not really going to affect theology. I think that the main reason in theology, I say, why common experience or universal necessary experience is more useful is that you know God by the negativa. And to negate the general is more useful than negate the particular. So we show in theology that God is unchanging. We don't show that God doesn't walk, doesn't run, doesn't jump, doesn't fly, doesn't swim, right? Doesn't grow, doesn't. He's unchanging in general, right? So that's the knowledge of the general is more useful in theology than knowledge of the particular. God has parts, and what a part is, what a whole is. Doesn't know anything about H2O. H2O is useless knowledge in theology, it seems for the most part, right? Yeah. But whole and part is very important in theology. That's why it's providential that God has Thomas be the place where you can get this. You can never see the theology without that. When you explain the definition of eternity, you negate many things that are found in the definition of time and in our understanding of the now of time. Maybe later on this course we take up time, then we'll talk a little bit about eternity, right? We'll take up change in the first book. We'll show you how theology uses this. Aristotle shows it in the 11th reading here. I haven't given you yet, but
So we also follow the providence of the church and the fathers being educated with St. Thomas and finally in Greek philosophy.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not a good chance that there's nothing opposed to big chance, but why is the New Testament written in Greek, See, divine providence extended down to those things, right? I mean, you can give all kinds of historical reasons why it's written in Greek, right? Like that of the Great conquered the wicked. But I mean, God wanted it to you to do. And that has to do maybe with facilitating theology, right? The Greek language is a better language for theology than the Hebrew is, So they get to bring together Greek philosophy too, right? With Revelation. It's facilitated by the fact that there's Greek there, right? If you want to, resist the Greek influence, I mean, this is part of divine providence. The whole thing would be written, official text would be in Greek,
Then the knowledge, I think, the particular knowledge of scripture studies, come to know more facts and things about the times of the patriarchs.
It seems to me, when you read the modern scriptural scholars, they don't really illuminate the scriptures as much as Thomas does, or Augustine does, or the church fathers. And they don't seem to know what's most important, Not saying they haven't made some contribution, I think they have, but not as obvious. It's much of a contribution to understanding scripture. I think to try reading up more about it in the modern scholars, the Psalms, they don't seem interested in the way Thomas does this, complicated Psalms.